Hi, this is Josh Thompson, Mr. T at the Pathways Innovation Center in Casper, Wyoming. In world history, today in class, I'm recording the screencast video for my absent students. We clarified after watching the documentary on Buddhism and what have you, the major divisions and differences in belief of within Buddhism. So you know some of the differences in sects, SECTS, within Buddhism. The first and original sect is known as Theravada, or Theravada Buddhism. All are correct pronunciations. So it's orthodox or original teaching. Its important text is the Tripitaka, which are the three baskets in English. And those were the original teachings of Buddha written down by his disciple Ananda. Its focus is going to be on monasticism with monks that go to monasteries. All young men in Theravada Buddhism countries will spend some time at the monastery in their life and be supported by the community who gathers alms for them. But they're going to go study Buddhist scripture, particularly the Tripitaka, and follow Buddha's original teachings about how to meditate. The ritualistic step-by-step steps in meditation, different meditations, and what have you to reach nibbana. You'll find Theravadan Buddhists mostly in Southeast Asia, in Vietnam, Cambodia, and Laos. And their concept of nirvana, or nibbana in Pali, is that either you have death without rebirth, so you die and then you're not reborn and you cease to exist, or you disintegrate or disappear. You just kind of cease to exist or vanish. Roughly about 4 in 10 of the world's Buddhists are Theravadan. So again, that's the original form. The great or large vehicle for Buddhism is known as Mahayana Buddhism, right here. And this is more unorthodox. As Buddhism spread, Buddhism became very accepting of the local religions and beliefs and integrated or took those other religions or beliefs into itself. The key text to all Mahayana Buddhists is the Lotus Sutra. And the lotus is a flower that grows kind of like a lily on a pad in the middle of a scummy pond. So muck and what have you is a metaphor for the world's conspiracy to keep us from reaching enlightenment, and the world's conspiracy to sort of keep us coming back to this world of pain. Its focus is more upon the laity or lay people, so less of an emphasis on monasticism. Not that there are not monks in Mahayana, it's just not, the focus is on meditation and practice of the common person. And so you'll find Mahayana Buddhism in Japan, China, Korea, Tibet, Mongolia, Nepal, and really the rest of the world. The key difference of the Mahayana Buddhists is their belief in what's known as a bodhisattva. And so where a Theravadan thinks you just die without rebirth or vanish, when you cease to exist literally when you reach nirvana, they believe that you will have a choice and you can choose to continue coming back to the human plane of existence to help others in their suffering. And if you do that, you become a bodhisattva. The belief is that the bodhisattva, there are all kinds of bodhisattvas, but they don't particularly reveal themselves. So they're kind of secret and hidden. They could be a teacher or what have you, and they reveal themselves when essentially somebody's ready. Roughly 6 in 10 of the world's Buddhists are Mahayana, or about 56%. Now, some people say there's a third division, but it's really a form of Mahayana Buddhism, so called Tibetan or Mantrayana or Vajrayana Buddhism, which developed between the 600s to the present, mostly in Tibet, which is now part of modern China, Mongolia, and Nepal. Tantric Buddhism comes out of Tibetan Buddhism. About 6% of the world's Buddhists, or about 1 in 10, are Tibetan Buddhists. If you've heard of the Dalai Lama, he's a Tibetan Buddhist. Bardo's the practice of speaking to a dying person for 7 days, whispering into their ear as they see devas, little Buddha gods, previously reincarnated people who have reached enlightenment and now live in the Buddhist heavens. You might see devas or Buddhas, or you might see demons. And really, the belief here is that those are the worst parts of oneself, representing one's flaws or weaknesses. So if you're greedy, then you might see a demon that represents greedy as you're dying. And so as they whisper into your ear, they tell you, basically how to die. The sand mandalas we looked at in class are Tibetan Buddhists. Those can be done in sand or those can be painted. But all of the symbols and those have been taught for hundreds of years, those exact same mandalas are reproduced over and over again by each generation, has a different symbol or meaning that is being practiced meditatively while they're being drawn. And they really tune out the world and focus upon those meditations as they're creating those. And often they're destroyed, particularly sand mandalas by Tibetan Buddhists, basically to remind us that everything in this world is impermanent, it's temporary, and therefore we'll lose everything that we get attached to in this world. Singing bowls, tantric and Tibetan Buddhists mostly use those. Basically, the vibration is thought to be kind of a karmic bath to purify oneself and propel oneself to a higher level of meditation. And I think that's about it for Tibetan Buddhism. Of course, they'll find the Dalai Lama when the next one dies by showing objects to the person they believe is going to be the next Dalai Lama. And when they do that, the correct Dalai Lama will recognize one of his possessions from the prior life. The belief of the Dalai Lama, of course, is that the Dalai Lama, and I forget the name of the actual bodhisattva, but it's actually one of the greatest and first, little Buddhas after the first Buddha to have achieved enlightenment, who comes back as a bodhisattva and leapfrogs through time. So it's kind of like the Christian Pope, perhaps, or the Imam or Caliph in Islam. Or perhaps the patriarch of Eastern Orthodox churches. So kind of God's representative on earth, but in this case, a special bodhisattva that keeps reincarnating to help end suffering of people on earth. Okay, all the other forms of Mahayana Buddhism really splinter, and they actually start in Japan, and then they make their way to Korea and China and Southeast Asia, and they're changed, and there's a lot of interaction between the cultures and Buddhism, but they all started in Japan, strangely enough, from the 6th century, the 500s, to the 19th century, the 1800s, and really some of them are still evolving today, and they spread throughout Asia. The first version is Shingon, which was in the 800s or the 9th century. It's known as True Word Buddhism, and it's based upon learning secret mantras that only initiates, only people who study Shingon get to learn. And those mantras actually help propel them to cleanse their bad karma and toward cessation of existence or nirvana. So it's all about secret mantras that you meditate on. The next version that appeared really is Zen Buddhism, but I'm going to skip that for a moment and treat that last. But then Tendai Buddhism would be next, and it's also known as TEN''TAI. So it's kind of a blending of India, Japan, and Chinese Buddhism. Their key text for sure is the Lotus Sutra, and they believe in the idea of original enlightenment, that it doesn't take you many lifetimes or even a whole life of studying, but really your true state is to truly be, you don't have to be good, you are good. And when you realize your Buddha nature, then, your enlightenment is easy, and it can happen in a single lifetime. So this happens to be the most common form of Buddhism known to Westerners. You'll find a lot of Tendai Buddhist texts in hotels in Hawaii and around the world, particularly in China, though. So it starts in Japan, goes to China, comes back to Japan, and then spreads throughout the world. It is the most familiar form of Buddhism throughout the West. Next, we have Jodo, or Pure Land Buddhism, which is really influenced by trade with Christian and Muslim traders and their concept of heaven. It's the number 2 form of Buddhism within Japan today, and it's also known as the Western Paradise. But the belief is that when you finally reach nirvana, you actually kind of do go to an actual Buddhist heaven known as the Pure Land or Western Paradise, a heaven that was created by the vows and good karma of past Buddhas. And so they really took that Christian and Muslim concept of heaven to heart and created a Buddhist heaven. So that is the number 2 form of Buddhism in Japan, behind Zen Buddhism. And then that leads me to the last one to treat, which really is the second splinter group of Buddhism, but because it is number 1 in Japan, I saved it for last. And they developed between the 200s and the 500s, so between the 3rd and the 6th century. I had strong Taoist influence. And we have Nichiren, one of its founders, and Nagarjuna, who's actually Indian. So there's Japanese-Indian influence here, and his doctrine of emptiness. And the Buddhist Zen Buddhist meditation, or zazen, which can refer to Zen in Japanese, but it can also be the particular type of meditation that Zen Buddhist is. There's kind of three parts where you realize that form is form and emptiness is emptiness. And basically, the idea that this world that we live in,